Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 195. Thank you for joining us. Today, Bonnie and I are joined by the Angel brothers, author and speaker Bobby, and Kolbe instructor Dan. Taking advantage of this family reunion of sorts, our conversation finds a focus on how the human soul is meant for greatness. Whether this comes up in video games, running marathons, or whatever else, we experience the call toward adventure and fellowship. Even if you're not an angel, we're glad that you're with us. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and chief homeschooling officer for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. Greetings from the deep freeze. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're enjoying a little bit of the cold here. Reminds me of my Wisconsin origins, even though we're not supposed to have much of this here in Arkansas, but a couple days isn't bad.
Yeah, here too. It's very, very cold here, has been for the past few days. And I think it's supposed to maybe warm up a little bit. And by the time this episode airs, it's going to be well in the rearview mirror. But for the time being, it's quite the event here for us. We're not really prepared for this sort of weather. It does happen maybe once a year, but I'll be glad when this one is behind us. So yeah. Today we're visiting with a pair of brothers, Bobby Angel, who was our guest on episode 146, and his brother Dan, who teaches for Kolbe. Hi, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be here.
It's nice to see you again, Bobby, and meet you, Dan. We like to feature our Kolbe instructors when we can. So let's start there. Dan, would you tell us about yourself, your background, your Kolbe connection, that sort of thing?
Yeah, of course. I imagine we'll get more to the earlier stages of life later as Bob and I chat a bit more. So to skip ahead a little bit, I know last podcast with him, you kind of heard his story as well, but we have kind of a similar parallel story in a lot of ways, which is funny. But I went to college, born in St. Pete, Florida. And again, we'll get more to family stuff later, I'm sure. But went to college at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. And then after 4 years there, ended up in the seminary myself for 5 years total. And we can have a whole nother podcast about discernment and journeys that takes us, because I was in seminary for 1.5 years and then discerned out for 1 year and then went back in. So total of 5 years. And then my ultimate discernment out part of that was to follow the woman who is now my wife to St. Louis. She was doing her residency there, about to start that. So I went out there. Post-seminary, became a youth minister up there in St. Louis for the 3 years that we were there. In the midst of that time, we got married. And then after her residency was done, we made our way back to Florida, where we're both from. And then I started teaching at a brick and mortar high school, teaching theology to high schoolers. And that was just such a blessing and such a fantastic time, and time of real growth for me as well. To kind of dive deeper into my faith in a different way of that capacity to teach it, and taught probably at least 4 or 5 different courses throughout my 4 years there. So really got the plethora from freshmen to seniors I was able to teach. And then at the end of this past academic year, it was just really on our heart that it was time for me to kind of step back from kind of the teaching full-time in person. And then that's when I made my transition here to Kolbe Academy. So this is my first year, beginning the spring semester here at Kolbe. So it's been great. My wife and I, we have 2 kids and 1 on the way. So we have a 3-year-old boy, about a 1.5-year-old daughter, and then our 3rd is due in April.
Beautiful. What are you teaching for Kolbe?
Seniors, I'm teaching morality, church history 3.
Okay. When you were teaching in the high school, would you have seniors whom you'd had as students their freshman year? Would you see them kind of come full circle, or at least further down their development?
I did. I had a pretty unique journey that doesn't really happen. So I started off teaching freshmen my first year. And then after that, they moved me to juniors my second year. And I did that for 2 years. So the freshmen that I had that first year, I had them again as juniors. And then my final year, I taught juniors and seniors. So some of them I got to teach through, and our senior level was by semester. So some of them I taught 4 classes, the select few that I had for 4 separate theology classes throughout high school.
Got to know them quite well.
Yeah, unique experience, and also kind of a nice bookend time frame for me to leave after those 4 years, because I got to really see those students through.
And I would think you would be very much a mentor to them, accompanying them through that formative time. Yeah.
Oh yes. And my first 2 years is there, I also worked in the campus ministry department. So I was also very privileged to be able to work and participate in all the retreats and other discipleship groups that we have on campus. We had RCIA on campus that I was heavily involved in as well. So yeah, for many of them, it was much more than just in the classroom learning. It was also that accompaniment and walking with them throughout their spiritual journey throughout.
Which has so much importance, just seeing their mentors who are teaching them these concepts, living them outside of that context, I would think.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Of course. So the Kolbe subjects you're teaching now, and you're in your teaching experience, what do you like? What do you like about that? And for those who are like, oh, how do you even do that? How do you respond to that?
It is a challenging thing to teach in a lot of ways, of just the subject of theology, of how broad it is. We're never going to grasp the fullness of that truth. But then in particular, what I taught for 3 of my years at the high school that I was at, Jesuit High School in Tampa, I was able to teach the morality class there for 3 years, among other classes as well. And that's what I'm teaching now at Kolbe as well. So this is my 4th year teaching, Catholic morality. And it's not what I ever foresaw myself teaching, but I absolutely fell in love with it. And it's been a great challenge for myself, again, to dig deeper into it and to learn to a much deeper degree, and reading the church documents and so forth, of, how to explain exactly what we believe and why, especially to high schoolers. And the school I was at was all boys. So to teach, morality to all boys, juniors in high school, and now to have that challenge and privilege as well to our Kolbe seniors and some juniors as well that are in that class, and really just to take that theology and that understanding and the depth of what we believe and who we are, but then to also give it that practical level of how do we actually live that out in the world, and what are the challenges that you all are facing day in and day out, that in a lot of ways are the same, and a lot of ways are very different than when we were growing up in their same situation. So it's been a challenge and a joy to dig deeper into that aspect of morality, and to be able to bring it and teach it, and have those really tough conversations, that they, in a lot of ways, we're the only place, along with their families, that they'll really get the truth, that they're not getting from the rest of the secular world.
Yeah. Do you have some kind of common entry points to kind of get those conversations going, where I would think probably especially in today's climate, to kind of get to the point where you're able to have a conversation about that, there's some I guess meeting them where they are, and how do you find that point, and then kind of go beyond to where they're willing to continue the conversation with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that is just really being authentic myself, and showing that I actually really care for them. As a person, as you're not just my student, I'm not just your teacher, that I really do want to see you get to heaven and become a saint, and to grow in holiness, and to grapple with those tough questions of what you're facing in life, and those struggles, and whatever it might be. And especially at the high school level, where most of my time has been with youth ministry and teaching throughout these past decade or so now, I guess, in my life. They're able to sniff out really quickly when you're not being authentic, and when you don't really care, when you're just going through the motions. So I think really being authentic myself, and again, sharing prudently, sharing my own story with them, and my own journeys and struggles, and they're really able to latch on, and they're much more willing to open up, whether it be in the classroom, just off to the side on a retreat. So that's no magic formula or like thing to say necessarily, right? But just kind of showing that and being relational in that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would think you and Bobby have a lot of notes to compare from your similar teaching experiences from Bobby's time teaching. Were those similar subjects that you taught, Bobby, when you were teaching in high school?
I only taught junior year morality once, but it was to a batch that I already had as a freshman.
Okay.
So it was this fun reunion of sorts where some guys think they know what to expect and they're just, oh, Mr. Angel, and they're gonna just kind of coast through, and you're like, oh, we're a little different. I expect you to write like a junior, not like a freshman anymore. And like, oh, Mr. Angel, what's the big deal? And so sometimes you get it's like the too familiar sense amongst certain students, but uh I think Dan and I come from we're cut from the same cloth, where at the end of the day, it's like we want you to know Christ. Like we want you to um, be convicted and living in the truth outside of the classroom, like more than just spitting back the facts to get an A. It's like, yes, take your studies seriously, but I want you to be a good human being underneath all of this. So we did compare some notes. Some were helpful, some weren't helpful at all. And some of it's just like, you teach it how you're going to teach it. Good luck.
Yeah, that's the overlap I find interesting, and we'll talk more about that as our conversation progresses. There are a couple of Kolbecast episodes that come to mind as we're kind of talking about the moral theology and 12th grade curriculum that have. So I wanted to mention those, and I'll mention them again. They are episode 179, Translation Tug of War with Dr. Matthew Minard. He was talking about moral theology, and our Kolbe 12th grade curriculum came up during that conversation. There's a section of that episode that touches on that, as well as episode 148, Engage and Apply. There's a section of that episode where we discuss Kolbe's 12th grade offerings and the value of sticking with the Kolbe curriculum through the 12th grade year. I'll link those in our show notes so folks can check those out after this episode. All right. So, Bobby, would you catch us up a bit and fill us in on what you've been up to and what you're up to now?
I can't believe it's been a year. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I was just on Kolbecast like 6 months ago. And you said, no, it was actually last February.
Yeah.
Like, oh, so in that time, we've had a baby and baby Benny, who was born in June. I have a new book out, Gaming and the Heroic Life with Ave Maria Press. And that's on the topic of video games and discipleship. Can you can you live both? And I really wrote it. It's kind of the research is me search. Like I was writing in a way to my 17-year-old self. And Dan is throughout the book, by the way. Dan is forever player number 2. Poor guy. I was Mario. He had to be Luigi. I was Wolverine of the X-Men. He had to be Cyclops, like, and onward. So Dan has cameo appearances throughout the book. Um, a just really great response. So part of it was writing to a young person who loves video games, but is kind of unsure about God and faith and how does it all fit, and to be a source of evangelization to that, as well as a resource for parents and families where this might be a source of contention or stress. And so, how do you approach the subject as, um, where you can hear each other and not just wag a finger and not just write off this part of the world, part of the culture that's not going anywhere. The book was about to go to print, and then the Super Mario Brothers movie came out, and it achieved the highest animated weekend opening of any animation film. So it beat out Disney. It beat out Frozen 2 for like the highest revenue that opening weekend. So a movie based on a video game holds the animation record. So, and I teared up like twice during that film. It was beautiful. It's a nostalgia fest. The music is wonderful. Um, my kids were they hadn't gotten into Mario Kart yet. Now they fully are. So now they get all the references. But at first they're like, he eats mushrooms to get big. and they drive go-karts. And I'm like, yes, it makes total sense.
Yes, I mean, well, sure, of course.
Yeah, of course it our little 7, almost 8-year-old philosopher, she's looking at me like, this is weird. It's, just roll with it. It'll make sense. Um, it's Mario, Pikachu, Sonic the Hedgehog. These characters are recognized worldwide, and so I was waiting for someone else to write this book. No one was doing it, so I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And um, it was a delight to write. And it's philosophy. It's John Paul II and Super Mario put in a blender, and I'm just getting good feedback from anecdotally from um, parents who have read it, from young people in their 20s and 30s who are reading it, just speaking to that like call to adventure, call to beauty, um, call to fellowship. Some people game for the online like community. I want to play with other people, because it used to be like whoever was in my neighborhood, we'd get together. It's 4-player, or like again among siblings and family members. Like this is how we're having fun together. Dan and I would shoot zombies whenever like we'd be home on college breaks. Was kind of we'd boot up a game, and that was some of the bonding where you're shoulder to shoulder doing this thing together. It used to be bowling leagues, and now it's these digital arenas where real conversations can happen. And yes, there can be a lot of immaturity. There can be a lot of like there can be negative elements to it, of course. But the book is largely an affirming resource of this topic, and I'm proud of the end product. It was fun to write. Both my wife and our mom was like, I cannot believe you wrote a book about video games.
Mhm.
And I said, and Jesus, and Jesus.
I'm having a memory of when our family got our first Nintendo. I was elementary school, and it was a really big deal. It was not like, oh, you want a Nintendo? Okay, let's go get it. Like, no, it was a quite a momentous occasion when we went to Walmart and we got the Nintendo. We were walking through the store to check out, and the kids in the store were like, oh, they've got a Nintendo. They're getting one of those today. It was yes, and it has come out here recently, and our boys who are now 16 and 18, the eldest is a college freshman. He was been home recently for the holidays, and they were enjoying some games together. And I was thinking back to when they were little, and it was kind of a different. And anyway, I just having some of those memories as I hear you describe the book, and I'm so happy for you that it is off to such a great start and getting such a great reception. I would think. I want, is there a bit of, I want to make this assumption, I'll just ask. Are people surprised, especially young folks, are they surprised when they first hear the premise of your book, and then once they get through it or hear you describe it, are like, oh, wow, that's not what I expected? They may be coming from more of a place of defensiveness. Like, what are you going to take me to task for about that, perhaps?
I've gotten both, and I've gotten more of like finally, like,
Okay.
or you're putting towards what I've always thought but never was able to convey,
Okay.
that there is beauty in this, like the storytelling. It's not just mindless escapism. Everyone will play games for different reasons, and whether that's Candy Crush or The Sims, whether that's Fortnite or like Zelda or these big RPG kind of games, there's a different why behind it. So it's also like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for adventure? Are you looking for camaraderie? Are you looking just to escape with Tetris? Just waiting on the bus or waiting for your haircut? Like, um, and the funny thing is, I've also encountered a few people that you could tell like there's something there where they used to really enjoy video games, but they have shut that part of their life off because it's like, well, I can't be a disciple, I can't be a good Christian and enjoy this thing. And this is almost like a it's poking the bear on that assumption. Or a person just isn't, it's not their cup of tea, and they've just kind of from the outside seen it as like, this just rots your brains, and this is a waste of time, whatever. So and I delight in all of it. Like, let's talk about that. Like, what's been your experience around video games? So I just really enjoy it as also like an icebreaker of sorts, because everyone's got an opinion. Everyone also gets this big smile on their face when they think about like the first game you ever played, because it just is this nostalgia triggering part of our lives right now.
Definitely. I saw a recent post of yours referring to playing Duck Hunt, and I was like, yeah, that we had that. I remember playing that. And I have the piano sheet music for the Mario Brothers, some of their theme songs, and the underwater theme I like to roll out every once in a while. Yeah. Would you say a bit more about that desire for adventure and how that how we can kind of draw from that to go deeper in our spirituality, our walk with God, those sorts of things?
Yeah, for anyone listening who has kids or relatives, it's like if you don't play video games, someone you love does at this point in time. And one of the best questions you can ask is, what do you enjoy about that game?
Okay.
Because it validates this part of your life that you enjoy. That, again, any good thing can be taken to an extreme, and we can overdo sports or health and fitness or shopping or the virtual world. Like all of these things can become idols. And so, but to start with the footing of, hey, what do you love about Minecraft? What do you love about Final Fantasy? Like start with that kind of affirmative. What is it you're looking for? And for some people, it's adventure. And I want to get lost. I want to explore. I want to create. And like, great, that's a good thing. Like you're drawn to beauty. Like again, you mentioned the music. Like they invested in like those first Mario games. They really invested in the music. Like these melodies need to not just they matter, and they have stood the test of time. Everyone knows the Mario theme, like, and hearing it in full orchestra in a movie was also like this. Here we are, we've arrived.
Yeah.
Um, for some people, it's like as I said before, it's the fraternity aspect, the community. Um, that's not just limited to my geography anymore. It's people around the world. For some people, it's I just feel like I have a purpose. I have a mission. And if we have stripped God of the world, if we have taken a sense of like uh, purpose to the cosmos and you matter, if that's just kind of been stripped away and we're all just random atoms in a meaningless universe, well, video game developers know like, well, the player needs to feel like they're the hero. They want to battle good and evil. And if I'm not feeling fulfilled by that in the quote real world, I will certainly seek it out in the digital where it feels like I can be the hero. My decisions do matter. I do have autonomy. So this is something that game developers have known for a long time. And I remember um, seeing the commercial years ago of a PlayStation uh, advertisement, and it was all this chaos, and it was dragons and car crashes and like this post-apocalyptic world, and the hero is walking down the street, and the tagline for the commercial says, "Greatness awaits." And we had Pope Benedict at that time, and it was that attributed line to him. You were not made for. Oh, I just forgot it. Dan, can you help me out? You're not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. Yes. Which is kind of a paraphrasing of what he actually said, but still, it was that like, yes, like we need more people, parents, role models, clergy saying, young people, you were made for greatness. You're not made just for leisure and mere comfort of the world. And I remember watching this commercial saying, wow, they get it. Like the human heart, the soul is meant to be challenged towards greatness. So that's something that absolutely is a bit of a carrot to draw people into the gaming world. Is like, yeah, be great. And my response is yes, and also chase greatness here in the real world. Like you were meant, like that's kind of the breadcrumbs I have in the book. Is like, hey, yeah, you have an ache for beauty. Where does beauty come from? You have an ache for adventure. Like, did you realize like your life has a vocation, like a purpose and a calling to it? And if there's a game designer. And just to kind of, again, drop the breadcrumbs where a young or not so young person reading the book would be like, oh, I've never thought about that before.
So in your work with young folks, how do you find it to go? I guess I'm wondering about how to pull out those themes in a way that is, I guess I come across a bit preachy in a way. So, or I'm concerned that I will. So how do I kind of, I like the suggestion to validate, to find, to that curiosity, like what is it that's attractive to you? What do you get from this? To kind of then point out parallels in outside of the gaming world, opportunities in real life to serve others or to be the hero or to things like that. I'm not quite sure if this is a coherent question just yet. It's the transition from away from video game time to other things in life that are, which is not to say there's no time for that, but the balance of that time versus the other things of living.
There's a question in there.
There is a question. Like how
No,
yeah.
it's the call to be integrated.
There
Where
it
you
is.
can have
Okay, yeah.
yeah, you can have one foot on the shore and enjoy, like, be anchored in our body and soul reality. And I drew upon the example, like during COVID, we had the like mass online, which was helpful to keep us in touch with one another and the calendar year. But there was a sense of like it's not enough. Like we need to receive the Eucharist in person. Like I can't just do church online. Um, and so to have one foot in like the digital space and you can enjoy the stuff, but also be anchored back in like, okay, but now it's time to turn it off. And now it's time to engage with the world and for our children. And like they haven't developed self-discipline yet. So it is still the role of the parents in some sense to be the bad guy, to say like, okay, it's time to turn it off. And but then to put the opportunities, like again, to not just demonize the medium, but to say, hey, like let's watch a movie together. Let's read this book together. Let's go out in nature. Let's go hiking. Let's go serve. So in the 6th chapter of the book, I do get into some of the pitfalls of, are games addictive? Do they make us violent? Like what are some of the negatives here? But then the last 3 chapters are that call to integration and to use the digital media for good. I land on Blessed Carlo Acutis' story and how he is Italian millennial who died in 2005, 2006 from aggressive leukemia, is now on the way to sainthood. He coded, he played video games, he loved Pikachu, and he also knew when to turn it off, when to go serve the poor. He made like daily mass. So it's the both end can be achieved. And I think every family just has to discern what are our rules, how do we keep the balance, and yeah, and be not afraid. Be not afraid of it. And like I said, also to have those hard conversations at times. We could go on, but I want to bring Dan back into it as well, because we both grew up in a house where the games were allowed and we're also kind of regulated in the sense of like you get your homework done and you do your sports and you get like we go to mass and then all these other things get done and then the gaming is like a cherry on top.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious about your formative years. You guys growing up in the same household and the somewhat similar experiences that you've had each individually, your discernment processes and how you both continue to serve the church. I'd love for you guys to expound on that and tell us about how you felt, what you looking back now, where you are looking back upon your family of origin that kind of helped lay the groundwork for that, and made it such that you would consider that and then go move forward with it. What do you think, Dan? Do you want to start with?
Sure. I would say one of the main things was just like the consistency of it all, for one thing. I mean, you know, um, we grew up going to Catholic school from kindergarten through 8th grade. So, that foundation of sending us to a Catholic school and getting, some of the basic education there when it comes to our faith, daily mass was a given, praying before meals. So just that consistency of faith in our life and just the faithfulness to that, I think set a wonderful foundation for us. And then both of us, when we got to high school, the encouragement to attend youth group and just always been supportive when it came to that of, diving deeper into our faith and, when it jumping ahead, and we can go back to when Bob chimes in, but going ahead to college, we both were able to dive kind of head first into our campus ministries, the Catholic campus ministries that at our respective schools that we had. And throughout it, I think through the process of then learning more about vocation and discernment and all of that, as we were going through and learning about it, I think our parents were as well. I don't think they were necessarily formed in that same language of discernment and how to go about that and everything, but they were always trusting of us and supportive of us that, we had our head on our shoulders, and that we know what we're doing, we're following the Lord, and whether that be going in or out of seminary once, twice, so I think that consistency there, that faithfulness, and that trust in who they have formed us to be as well as men. So.
Yeah.
There was freedom, and not just license, but like a respect for, you guys need to make your own choices. Our dad's saying is that as a parent, you pave the road as best you can, and then you give your child the freedom to walk it, which is hard. It's hard to let go. It's hard to entrust your kids with a long leash. And I think we just saw it lived. We just saw our parents that, yeah, like Sunday Mass was not an option, but the faith wasn't like shoved down our throats, because we could, like I said, enjoy video games, enjoy sports, enjoy friendships. So it wasn't like a sheltered childhood. It just like the faith was part of the equation. And as we hit high school years and we really got rocked by a dynamic youth ministry program, it went from following the rules, this is a good moral way to live, to like, this is real. Like, God is real. And it's like, this is something to be joyful about and give your life to. And we went to different colleges, but both Dan and I, went headfirst into our like Newman centers, and separately both discerned a calling to the priesthood. So for a while, our parents were facing the prospect of two celibate children, no grandchildren. And now it's swung the other way to where they've got about 8, right?
In April, it'll be 8. Yeah.
In April,
when we have our 3rd.
Yep. Yeah. So they've gone from like silence to lots of noise when we all are in the same household. Yep. But the beauty of the surrender of that, I was trying to think like because our parents will get that question, like, what did you do? Like, what did you do with your kids that they stayed in the faith and they were both considering the priesthood? Like, they're all in. Like, they both separately have worked in campus ministry and teaching settings. I was in California at an all-boys school for a number of years before going full-time ministry here with my wife now. And Dan is now with Kolbe Academy. And so it's been beautiful parallels that were very much unplanned. We didn't sit down, Dan and I, and have like a master planning meeting of how we're going
to go to seminary this year, right?
Yeah. Let's really screw with mom and dad this year. It just, in God's comedy and sense of humor, and our parents like surrender and their own like growth in the faith too.
Yeah.
Because
I think humility.
Yeah.
That they possess as well. Because like Bob said, whenever they get asked, like, what did you do? The answer is always like, we didn't do anything. It's not us, it's the Lord. So yeah, it's very much seeing their example as a good, faithful married couple, and loving each other, providing for each other and for us, and everything that we've been saying, that trust and that freedom, in that healthy boundaries, at the same time, but seeing us grow and progress, and as Bob was getting to, right, seeing their growth in the faith as well. I think when they really saw us, particularly in college, I think both get much deeper and have that personal aspect to our faith. You're not under your parents' roof anymore, but we're still choosing to go to Mass and to go to these campus ministries and eventually seminary that we very noticeably saw them as well get deeper into their faith and, become Eucharistic ministers and part of the hospitality and, on and on. We've seen them get involved to a deeper degree in their faith as well.
Sounds like that integration again. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that word was coming up too. Yeah, that seems like you're talking about things which for some parents, I mean, that it sounds kind of scary going off to a state school in Florida there or whatever. But it seems like they helped you to put things in that right perspective. Like I think you were talking about Bobby, like with video games before, knowing, you know, where do they fit in? But it sounds like in your family life that was built in to a large extent. It sounds like at least to that.
Yeah, we both went to public high school after K through 8th Catholic school, and my mom cried dropping me off at school freshman year because walking by was some guy with like a mohawk and a girl with like blue hair and piercings, and my mom was like, "What have I done?" But it's that like honestly like those years, the little years are some of the most formative, the most important to like for secure footing. And once that foundation's built, it's like, okay, like I trust you to start interacting with the world and meeting people of all sorts of different backgrounds. And I'm here for any questions you have, for any of the conversations, like as parents, to be here, to be the experts in the room, so to speak, that our kids know they can come to us with questions is going to be so vital, as it's such a different landscape than when we were going through school. So the challenges are new, and yet at the same time, it is the same strategy of, like Mother Teresa said, if you want world peace, go home and love your family. And every family's got, like I said earlier, has to discern how are we handling technology, how are we handling just like the friends, and what are we saying yes to, what activities are we saying no to, like so that the family can be fostered. And it's easier said than done, I know.
Yeah, I think that aspect, as you were saying, that we always knew that they were there, whatever questions or difficulties or struggles, because obviously it's not as nice as maybe it sounds to the listener out there. Like we all of course had our own struggles and arguments and everything else, but
My
just to
our parents
know
our
that
parents
you're
knew the mood I was in based on what music was like blasting
music.
out of the bedroom. Like, oh, he's in a funk again.
Yep.
We got 90s grunge on. We're in trouble.
Well, Dan, drawing on all your youth ministry experience and the discernment that you entered into and continue as, even to today, how do you see that all of that impacting your teaching now?
I think a lot of what I was saying before, and I was kind of pondering this before, yeah, between all the discernment and the youth ministry and the teaching, and even within seminary, all the different kind of pastoral assignments that you have of, either teaching CCD or working at homeless shelter, going to the hospital and ministering there. You have such a range of those ministerial experiences. And I think that, yeah, that one of that biggest threads is again that authenticity and kind of intentionality behind it all of and the relationality of, again, just being there, walking with whoever it might be, again, whatever of that situation. But again, from the majority of my experience being with middle schoolers and high schoolers throughout that youth ministry and teaching, fifth year into teaching now, of, yeah, just being able to walk that line and to journey with the students then, in a particular way. And again, not just the teacher students kind of relationship there, but that great sense of accompaniment. Yeah.
Yeah. How are you finding that to go in the online context? Do you get folks asking like, how are you able to do that teaching online?
I think I ask myself that a lot.
Okay.
Sometimes because it is a big change, especially with high school theology at Colby. We have classes once a week. So I'm used to, back at my other school, having them every day for 50 minutes. And You know, a lot of that time, being with the students each and every day was essential. But there was a lot of time that, I don't want to say was wasted, but it's been an interesting, mentality and shift from seeing them every day to, seeing them once a week and, you know, the faculty and staff at Colby say it all the time of just how impressive our students are and everything else. So, but to really kind of like chime in with that again, I have been so impressed with just, especially by senior year theology and all the reading that they're expected to do. And this whole second semester in morality is just solely reading church documents, encyclicals, and everything else. And so it's not the easiest assignments that they do, but they show up to class and they've done the reading and they comprehend so much and they ask such great questions. So it just makes my job as a teacher so easy and so fun, to be able to be there with them and continue to answer their questions and tie those threads of what they've been learning throughout their whole education up to this point. And again, in a special way in morality, to be able to apply it to their daily lives in so many ways of what they're experiencing and struggling with. So it has been a pretty big shift to go from, in-person day in and day out to this online platform. But it is pretty incredible how well you can get to know your students, even in the midst of that. So, still figuring out a lot, still just my first year in here, but it has been a joy and the students have just made it so easy in that regard.
It's really putting a lot of that together with me with the conversations about video gaming before, because as you were talking about, like,
Yep.
people used to go out bowling and things together. My mother still goes out regularly with friends that she's had from fifth grade, and she's a long way removed from fifth grade. But that doesn't happen at least starting with my generation back in rural Wisconsin. Nobody stays in the same, or very few people stay in the same area. We're all over the place. So my interactions with friends that I've built up over the years, I don't do a ton of video gaming. I tend to do more role-playing games, but we get together online and we've only got a couple hours every week to kind of connect and Kolbe online classes, it's a similar sort of thing. How, the ability to utilize that technology, but to try to make real friendships and connections. So maybe they go together. You get practice playing computer games and then come to your Kolbe classes. I'm not exactly sure, but
Which is why it's this kind of exciting, messy time we're in, where there's a lot of problems. Like Carlo Acutis said, the internet is an atomic bomb for good, just as much as it's an atomic bomb for bad. This like kind of messiness of like to say online friendships aren't real friendships. It's like, well, not really. It's not true. We don't have like the words yet to encompass it. Of like they can be real. Like they can be real. Like I'm getting to know this person, even though we've never been in the same town. I have no idea how tall this person actually is. Like these dynamics that we're starting off on a different foot, it doesn't mean they're not real. And to just one last point on that, like the incarnation aspect too, of how as human beings we are at the end of the day meant for the physical and the real. I know streamers that they have contacts around the world, but if they're in a particular city, there's a desire to meet up. Like, hey, I'm in Detroit, I'm doing a meetup here. Like there is something that like these friendships that we've fostered online, thanks be to God, we have the technology, but it still isn't enough. Like the same thing with the Eucharist. Like I have to be in person. I have to receive it. And so awesome we have these digital tools, but it's still like I would love to see you in person. Like because that is somehow like the most human. At the end of the day, we crave it. We need it. I think that's beautiful.
yeah, that always comes through with some of our Colby gatherings, even with employees, because we work all remotely as well. But when we get a chance to get together, even for myself, I'm as introverted as you can find, and just cringe every time my phone rings. I don't really want to pick it up at all, but it's so exciting to get in front of them. And I love that you say we don't know how tall you are because we're all on camera, but it's like, wow, you're you're tall, or not, but it's so exciting just to, even for me as the biggest introvert, to just kind of get together in that natural situation, like you said. So I know our Kolbe students and families are always telling us, give us more opportunities for this. It's just hard to do because we're so scattered, but it's needed.
Yeah.
I think that's also true. And even just like that aspect of the meetups that you were talking about, um, and kind of the necessity for that a lot of times. And you see that all over. And again, I think in our recent day and age, that's gotten, so much more prevalent, just how much we all had to retreat online for a while. And but I've recently got kind of more and more into running. So I listen to different running podcasts and everything. And it's the same thing with that. Like whenever there's races around, there's all meetups of people who all listen to this or are part of this community. Like, let's get together and run together there. And I think that kind of speaks to also, you know, those of us who grow closer together, even through online, it's having that same goal in mind and that same kind of desire. So I think in a particular way for our Kolbe students, who are all, seeking holiness and seeking sanctity and, wanting to learn and grow more about it, that they are able to foster those true friendships, right? Again, it's not just that stigma of it's my online friend, right? But I think there can be that depth there because we do have that same goal in mind. And one of my classes in particular, it's a smaller class that I have. There's only like 10 students. But I was so kind of pleased to see that when like a lot of them have had classes together before. So immediately from day one, they're like the banter that they have with each other, whether it be when they come on the mic or just through the chat, like it's very evident that, oh, like they know each other, they're friends already. So it's so great to see that those true friendships can be fostered and how beautiful that can be.
Dan, how many marathons have you run?
5. I just ran my 5th one now.
It's not okay.
So it's one of those things, either you love it or you hate it. So for whatever reason, yes, I have found a love and a passion for it. So I'll keep doing it.
I did a half marathon in college and I said I will never run this far again. And one of the things Dan and I differ on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of bringing up the things of building those relationships, though. Like I know the Kolbe students who've never met each other, they get so excited again when they can, but going through hard things that you have a good end in mind, but the difficulties, the challenges in walking through those together really kind of forms those bonds. So I can see it like running. I can see when you say these meetups that, all of you are doing really hard things that you enjoy, but they're hard, and you're doing the same things, or even those challenges of gaming or whatever, where you're overcoming things and you're working as a team. But even that's more recreation than obstacles of overcoming a marathon, I realize. But it seems like those are the seeds to form really good friendships, especially when they're based on these underlying really good ends, the Kolbe students who are trying to pursue the true and the good here. But yeah, it's great seeds for friendship.
Well, as we're coming to the end of our time together, I'm wondering if you all have any final thoughts or takeaways to leave with our listeners. Dan, how about we start with you?
To kind of bring in the morality to it all and everything. I mean, it's obviously engrossed in all the conversation we've been having, but it's just this one particular one came to mind that we've talked about in class recently. I think it's number 310, talking about that with infinite wisdom and goodness, God freely willed to create a world in a state of journeying towards its ultimate perfection. So I think that really underlines a lot of what we've been saying, whether it be kind of this recent conversation about kind of the friendships and fostering that with the same goal in mind when it comes to our schooling and academics at Kolbe, whether it be the aspect of gaming, of running, of anything else, right? That we've been created in this state of journeying, the world and us as human beings, and to kind of have that in mind as we go throughout, again, wherever kind of our passions lie, But that ultimate end and ultimate perfection that we're seeking is obviously that union with God. So to bring that in all we do, and again, kind of finally to tie in that even that parent and child relationship in there as well. That if we can kind of trust that our children are journeying in that direction, right, that we can give them that freedom to continue on that journey, right, and to be there and journey alongside them.
Beautiful. What do you think, Bobby?
I can't follow that. That was way too eloquent. Journey is the name of this indie video game that won all these different awards that I document in Gaming in the Heroic Life by Ave Maria Press.
Shameless
self promotion here. I will say I wrote the book for families and for young people, so it's pretty easy reading level. And the original title was Virtue in Video Games, because I wanted it to be kind of for like a high school curriculum, like applying to morality and virtue and how do video games, even like games that have morality meters, like the game changes based on how you behave. Where does that come from? So we may have thrown God out of society, but there's still these like fingerprints all over, which include, hey, where does morality come from? Is there objective good and evil? And if so, like, okay, how do we judge that? So keep asking questions, keep journeying. I love it.
Yes. Okay, listeners, check out the show notes for this episode for links to Bobby's book, Gaming in the Heroic Life, as well as the Kolbecast episodes I mentioned earlier, and those that have come up in the course of conversation that are relevant to our topics today. Also, we have a listener survey out. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the Kolbecast and what you like about it and what you would like to hear from us on the Kolbecast. So we will put the link to that survey in our show notes as well. We'd be so grateful for your ratings and reviews and the podcast app you use to subscribe to us. Hint, hint, if you are not yet subscribed to this podcast. On the Kolbe website, kolbe.org/podcast, we have filters in place for our many Kolbecast episodes where you can sort by those filters to find more episodes according to your particular interests that we have in place there. So check that out as well. All right, Bobby and Dan Angel, what a real gift to get to visit with you all today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam.